everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film my review video for the Book Naturalist Book Club's July pick, which was Thin Places by Kerri Ni Dochartaigh. Dochartaigh. Yes, pretty sure that's how it is pronounced. I have been listening to people pronounce it and trying to make sure that I pronounced it correctly. So any mistakes are my own. And this is a memoir of a young woman who, the author obviously, who was born in Derry in the north of Ireland, and she was born in the middle of the Troubles. So born in 1983. And this is her discussion of what it was like to grow up during that time period and how she used nature as a way to basically give herself respite from the things that were bothering her, from all the trauma that she went through, and in order to find spaces where she could just be, she could just relax and feel at peace in some way in the world. And I found this book to be intensely, beautifully written and really thought-provoking and interesting. So let me just give you a little bit more background about our author. Like I said, she's a Northern Irish writer. She is somebody who has written for a bunch of different publications, but this is her first book-length piece of work, and it was shortlisted for the Wainwright Prize when it came out. And I believe it was published just last year. Yeah, 2021 it was published. So that was amazing to come out with your first book and have it be listed for a prize. And I can totally see why. So Kerri's mom was Catholic and her dad was Protestant. So you can see how this was a difficult position to be born into, and she suffered from a lot of traumatic experiences when she was very, very young. When she was 11 years old, her home was firebombed and the family barely escaped with their lives. And that is sort of a touchstone moment in her life, obviously. Other terrible things happened which she observed. There's lots of violence discussed in here. Obviously, people were murdered during the Troubles. People were killed in front of her. So if that's something that troubles you, this is probably going to be a book that you'll find difficult. And I should just say up front that there are other content warnings for suicide, like I said, violence, mental illness, and grief. If that's something that you find difficult at this moment, then just be forewarned that these topics are dealt with quite specifically in this book. So this memoir really does try to strike a balance between talking about the history of Ireland and the Troubles and nature writing. And as a person who is also very centered in nature, I could really relate to Kerri's efforts to balance herself by escaping to places that she felt particularly connected to nature. And she calls these places thin places, which is it is a term that is very specific to Irish mythology. Thin places are places where the veil between the present position and some other, spiritual other, is very, very thin. In fact, that you can feel like you're in limbo or in a place that is neither here nor there. This is very central to a lot of Irish mythology. And so for Kerri, a lot of the places that she would escape to felt like thin places to her. They felt like places where she could exist out of time and be sort of relieved from the everyday burdens that she carried within her. And that is something that, while I am not a person who is spiritual in that way, I do feel connected when I am in certain places in the outdoors. I feel like I'm in a place where time stands still and where I can just be present in the moment, and I don't have to deal with other problems that are plaguing me or other sort of worldly problems that are plaguing everyone. And I think that that is something that is so important. I mean, there have been research studies, scientific studies, which show that when people walk in the woods, you know, there's health benefits to that. You actually have lower blood pressure and lower heart rate and all that sort of stuff. It can relieve your stress to be in natural places. And Kerri goes to some pains to explain that this doesn't have to be a pristine environment. Like one of the very first places that she found as shelter in nature was in her back garden in sort of public housing, which was just like a cement wall surrounding a muddy dooryard. And she would take a microscope out there and look at stuff under this microscope in this sort of very urban environment. And there's wonder to be found everywhere out of doors. And I very much relate to that perspective. So I found, like I said, I found the language really impressive in this memoir. I'm not a person that typically notices, like I don't feel like I have a good tool set to be able to judge whether language is like well written or particularly poetic or anything like that. But even I could not escape the fact that this woman can write. She's very... like everything is very emotionally charged. Like there were times I had to put this book down because I felt like I felt too emotional about it. Like I was feeling her pain and her stress. And she just was able to capture it so completely on the page. I think it's pretty astounding, actually, the writing that's in this book. And it is very lyrical. I don't know if she, Kerri writes poetry in her other writings or whatever, but it felt very poetical to me, and very touching. A lot of the descriptions that she writes of not just nature, which I loved, but like things that she would write about grief, things that she would write about like trying to come to terms with her own trauma, like just incredibly emotionally impactful writing. I want to share a couple of different quotes with you before I actually share some sections here, because I always like to share sections of the writing so that you can get an idea of what this book is like. So she writes a lot about place and how places can become very special to you, and how either you feel very strongly tied to the place you are from, or you can feel very strongly tied to the place where you end up. And that notion really connected with me particularly. And I have a couple of quotes there in which she's talking about place in particular. There is a power to place, a hold that is kept over us, a woven thread that never really loosens itself once we have been there and been held by it. And I feel very, very much like that is me as it relates to water, and particularly ocean water. And she goes on to say in another part of the book, my earliest experiences of thin places involved water. Being beside water, by a river, waterfall, stream, or on a shoreline carries us into a state of existence neither here nor there. And I just feel this so strongly. I spend a lot of my time by the water, whether that's ocean water, lake water, river water, whatever. And I can very often lose myself in those time periods when I am beside water. So this felt like she was writing something that I have experienced quite often in my life. So I really appreciated that. So let me just share with you I'll just read one further section here because I don't want to go on too long, but I think this is another place where I really connected, and I think really is a great example of her writing style. I began to gather more things from the places I sought refuge in, and to bring them into my rented home. My 2 large windowsills looking out across the meadows on the right-hand side and Arthur's seat on the left, filled up with all manner of objects, varying in size and texture, depending on where I had found them. I mostly found those things on stretches of sand alongside the sea, shards and fragments, smithereens and bits and bobs, parts and portions of the coastline that was keeping me safe back then. Stones and pebbles, feathers and sea glass, bones and sticks brought back with me from one place to lie in another. Why? Were they bringers of comfort and constancy, these hallowed found things? Even after being spat out, dislodged from wherever they had once been, left to lie in the dark and cold, even after weathering storm after storm, there was still a place for them. There was a place for them in my home, in my life, and in my day. And even back then, I knew that meant something, even if I didn't know what. Did they make me feel a wee bit more embedded, in place, in a life I was struggling with every day, in my own body, that vessel that was somehow still dragging me through? Like those pieces, those measures of time and place, of memory, I was still there too. I was still visible. I was still holding on. And I'm going to insert a clip here of some of my own bits and bobs that I've collected over time. I almost always bring something back with me, and I like to display those things in certain areas around my home that remind me of places in nature that I've been where I found something that to me is special and anchors me to that location. Okay, these are my shadow boxes, and you can see right here, this is an egg that I found floating in the ocean on seaweed one day when I was doing some work out on the water, and it had an actual seabird in it that had died before it hatched, and we cleaned that out and kept the shell. That was pretty cool. This is a sand dollar, the kind that's called, I think they're called biscuits, sand biscuits from the Caribbean that I got during one of my trips. This is some beach sand from one of the places that there's some beach sand from one of the places we went to in the Caribbean. This rock was from climbing Mount Katahdin. It came off the top of Mount Katahdin, which is very illegal, so don't tell on us. There's some rocks in behind there as well. Jar of shells from different places that I've been. A eagle feather from one day that I was out collecting samples. This pine cone, I've forgotten now where that one came from, but that's not something that you'd find around here. This is a Passamaquoddy sweetgrass basket that was given to me when I left my last job. I love that. This is a picture of my family and I at the top of Mount Katahdin a few years ago. And this is a bowl made from, oh, it's quite dusty in there, sorry about that, made from a piece of wood by an artist friend of mine. So yeah, a burl bowl. Yeah, so that's the kind of stuff that I like to pick up and keep for my own pleasure, to remind me of places that I have been. I will also say that how she speaks about grief in this book is really, really resonant as well. It's gorgeous and it feels really true. I particularly related to a lot of how she talked about that. We've all experienced loss in our lives, and I think it's a struggle sometimes to describe how that feels. And, you know, I just appreciated so much the words that she used to talk about that particular issue. And then lastly, I really enjoyed how this book ended on a hopeful note. Like, there's a lot going wrong in the world, and she acknowledges that, but she also acknowledges that she feels hope for all of us, for herself, for her country, for the world, for the environment. She doesn't shy away from the extremely difficult things that need to be done and need to be dealt with, but she also realizes that you can't go through life without hope, because then, you know, what's the point? If there's no hope, there's no point. And I really appreciated that this person who had been through so much and had suffered so many things, she could speak with hope. Another thing I will say about this book is she never specifically, very rarely specifically addresses specific traumatic events in her life. She's pretty clear that, you know, her relationships with both her mother and her father, who split up when she was very young, are not easy relationships. But she doesn't, like, this isn't about calling people out. This isn't a memoir to, like, hash out every terrible thing that her parents did to her while she was growing up, or ways that they let her down as she was an adult. This wasn't about, like, assigning blame for things that happened to her in her life, that ways people treated her badly or hurt her. But it instead was very much focused on her own efforts to bring herself out of dark places and to get herself into a situation where she felt like she was happy, you know, and satisfied with her life. And I really thought it was well done. So yeah, this is another fabulous read for the Book Naturalist Book Club. I am so thrilled that we picked this one for July. And then for September, we will be reading let me see if I can pull it out here. We will be reading Mary Oliver. I don't have it right here with me. I have her essay collection, Upstream, I think is the name of it. And we will be spotlighting Mary Oliver in the month of August. So I hope that you will join us. I hope that you have some Mary Oliver that's laying around your house that you haven't yet gotten to. She is a wonderful poet. This is a poetry collection, 1,000 Mornings, which I read last year and really enjoyed. And I'm very much looking forward to discovering more of her work in the month of August. I hope you are all doing well and finding some great books to read, and I will talk to you later.